Okay, welcome back, dear viewers. This is episode 5 of my Alien RPG deep dive. It's probably going to be the last video. Uh, there's a few rules I didn't get into. I didn't think I needed to get into. Essentially, space combat and vehicle combat. Real quick, they're abstract, very similar to normal combat, just a few tweaks given the fact that it's space and vehicle. You'll just have to go with me on that. But today we are going to talk about cinematic play and campaign play and some of my criticisms of the game itself. But before we get into it, got to do the usual, right? This is what I do. I play games, I record myself playing these games, and then I talk about these games. I got nothing against the flip through review, but I have found that sometimes what you read is more fun than how it plays. This hobby can get expensive. If I tell you it's fun and you should buy it, it's because I've played it. Okay. And yeah, if that's something you like, actual plays and reviews, please hit like and subscribe, bell icon, yada, yada, yada. All right, so let's get started. Got to get that background music, right? So, cinematic play and campaign play. The book actually talks about that, and it actually splits these two concepts up. Um, Cinematic play, briefly, is just one shots. Campaign play is exactly what that sounds like, longer campaigns over many, many, many sessions with your group of players. Now, um, where I think Free League excels in every product I've purchased from them, this is where they excel. Talking about the themes of the game and the world building. Okay. And in the beginning of this book, it gives you an idea of how to set up your games, whether it's a one shot or a campaign. It gives you the basic themes of sci fi action, space horror, sense of wonder, and then that retro futurism, which, in today's day and age, it might be hard to sort of visualize, but I remember the original movies. I was a kid in the 80s, a teenager in the 90s, and I remember DOS, and the green screens. Some of you younger folks out there, it might be hard to sort of visualize this sort of low tech, semi near future vibe, but that's very much part of Alien RPG. And it makes, I guess, traveling through space kind of scary because you're just on these rickety ships, kind of analog. Um, uh, as an kind of an aside, I do want to talk about Free League's world building and the research they do, and also kind of an example of sort of what I'm talking about and why I do these videos. Free League's got a game called Things from the Flood. It's not the kind of game I'd play. I'm not even sure if it would be fun to play. But when I read it, I was transported back to the 90s. It's a game about teenagers in the 90s dealing with teenage themes, but also some weird, scientific, somewhat scary mystery. Okay, and that's essentially what the game is. Um, Again, not really my thing, but man, did they do a wonderful job talking about the 90s, the themes of the 90s, the kinds of music and art and books people were reading back then. I mean, I was transported back to my teenage years. It was really nice. It's on my shelf. I'm glad it's on my shelf. I'll probably just never play it. Alien RPG is no different. I mean, the world building here is really done well. Like, they've done their research, they've clearly watched all the movies, clearly read all the fan fiction and other products out there to sort of flesh out the Alien universe and to provide you with the essentials to play this game. So and like any horror game, it kind of gives you an idea of like how they approach it. Fear of the unknown, loss of control, and then really horrible choices, right? To overcome whatever you're facing. and then some advice on how to present all of this stuff. And again, it's a story game, so there's things you need to consider that you might not typically consider in like a more OSR game. So the agendas, personal agendas, come into play, um, and you have a bit more discretion when sort of designing these encounters and campaign story hooks and whatnot to try to make this, you know, a good sci-fi horror game. There is sort of this presupposition that the characters are working class, and if you've watched the movies, that's pretty much the way it is. And there's like these big things happening with the corporations. Wayland Utani being the big one, right? That's moving things behind the scenes, and the players are sort of caught up with that. Um, and the idea of just being in space where a hull breach could wipe out the crew sort of adds further tension, and you can use that to try to create a really nice game session for your players and scare the crap out of them. Hopefully, right? So cinematic play, the one shot. The idea is to emulate something that happens in the movies. Okay, high stakes, fast and brutal play. I wish there were some example scenarios provided, just like like hooks or something to give you something to do. I suppose, and we'll get to this later, in the back of the book there are mission generators. I suppose you could use those to sort of give you an idea as to what to design for a one shot. Um, Certainly, I think cinematic play, the one shot, is where this game excels. Um, you know, I mean, you get to use the xenomorph, and you get to have your players, have brutal deaths at the hands of, one of, Hollywood's most iconic monsters. And the game book gives you an idea of how to set the stage and writing for your adventure scenario. Three acts: the setup, the tilt, the showdown. They even suggest an epilogue. I envision like the lone survivor in a escape pod, sounding off an SOS message, that sort of like drifts off into the void in the hope that they get rescued, but the session's over, that kind of thing. But this is really it. This is literally one page discussion of cinematic play, which I find odd considering this is where Alien RPG excels, because we go into campaign play and the world building, and this is where I actually think Alien RPG sort of starts to, as a long-standing campaign game system, starts to fall apart a little bit. So, but we'll get into that. So, again, I said the world building's great. The book itself is almost 400 pages, and there is a ton of awesome stuff in here about the governments and agencies and corporations that the players will interact with, that you as a game master, or as this book likes to call mother, you can use to create scenarios. I'm a big fan of politicking in with faction play, so I was really impressed with the breakdown of the three major world factions, and that was provided. And you have to remember, when the movie Alien came out, it was in the late 70s. We were still in the United States and the Soviet Union were in a Cold War, so that's still very much alive in this. So you have the three world empire. That's essentially Great Britain, India, and Japan sort of teaming together to go out into the stars. Okay, and they are the teal colored swirl on the star map here. Okay, And then you have the United Americas. That's literally North and South America. Those continents teamed up, all under Reaganomics type stuff, right? I mean, they're the capitalists heading out into space, and they're the blue guys here. And then you have the United Progressive Peoples. That's Russia and China. I call them space commies, right? And they're the red, unironically, right? The red splotch on the map here. The golden one down in the center is a group called the Independent Core Systems. Okay, and then you have the corporations, and the book actually provides you more than just Weyland-Yutani. You have Siegson, which has become my personal favorite because they're desperately trying to compete with Weyland-Yutani but fail miserably. If you've played the video game Isolation, Alien Isolation, Siegson is the one that made Sevastopol Station and the Working Joes. But there's other corporations that are in this that you can use. Okay. Then there's a section of the book that goes through the systems and planets. And what I really like too is that certain sections of the map is where some of the movies take place. And it'll let you know that this is where this happened and this is where this other place happened. And it also goes into, the Prometheus movies too. So it does a real nice job connecting you, the reader, to the movies. Okay, and then kind of gives you some ideas on what to do as the players are moving about the map. What I also think is kind of subtle, but it's inherent in this section and the later sections of this book, is that this is essentially set up the campaign play like Keep on the Borderlands, but in space. They have an entire section devoted to Novgorod Station, where you can place anywhere on the frontier, and it's a place to call home, right? They have a system generator for when the players are traveling the stars, and then a job creator, which is essentially the adventure hooks. To me, that's exactly how I ran my campaign. It was Keep on the Borderlands. I had Novgorod Station, I think, set up around here somewhere, and then I just had various spots on the campaign map where jobs were. Okay, so there, the book visualizes three types of campaigns, and I think this is really smart. It's based on the movie. So Space Truckers campaign is like the original movie. They're doing a cargo run, right? Working for a corporation, and then the xenomorph happens. Then you have the second movie, the Colonial Marines campaign, where it's military missions and you're working for a government agency or the government itself, right? And then you have the Frontier Colonist type game, and that's like Alien 3, or maybe some of the Prometheus movies. But that's where you're off on an expedition to find stuff. Okay. Each of these sections kind of gives you some ideas of what careers for your game, a starting spaceship, and weekly salary that the players are going to get as they campaign. The job generator section I think is actually really nice. It's broken down by the type of job it is, and there's a different table depending on which type of campaign you're doing. Right, so you can have a routine space trucker type job. You can have a normal marine job. You can have a very difficult frontier colonist job, depending on where you want to roll. Right. Each table it gives you a destination to kind of give you the game master mother to an idea of what you need to work on next for your adventure. Complication with this is considered twist. The base reward for accomplishing the mission, and it's in American dollars, and then any extra reward that may be available, and that's an entirely separate chart. Some routine missions, for example, probably won't have an extra reward, but the more complicated ones might. So There are encounter tables for space encounters with a reaction table, and then a table for surface encounters and colony encounters. I don't mind the colony encounter one, but generally speaking, these encounter tables are really general and kind of perfunctory. Like space encounters, it'll say, you've encountered a oil tanker type truck, and that's it. That's it. And then the reaction table is pretty kind of subpar in my opinion. Most of the times, ships don't talk to each other. It says that in the book. So these encounter tables are lacking in my opinion. There's also a star system generator, and it takes into account planet size, atmosphere, temperature, geosphere, planetary terrain, colony size if one exists on the planet, the colony's mission, any factions, etc., etc. All very useful for generating something for your campaign or adventure session. And I like it. I like it. It's a little crunchy, but I do like it. Okay, so that's campaign play versus cinematic play. I'm gonna go into some of my complaints now. All right, and this is really more more leveled against the campaign play. There are additional rules in this book that are necessary to meet some of the essential elements of this game's themes, but they're sprinkled throughout the book and very hard to find. A good example is light speed and what happens when you don't go into cryo. Your character uh, will suffer mental trauma for for whatever reason. That's what happens. And what's interesting about space travel, every ship has a speed rating, and that speed rating is the number of days it takes to cross a parsec. So if you have an 18 and you're trying to get to a star system that's 10 parsecs away, it's going to it's going to be 180 days. Okay, and then every week you got to make this. If you're not in cryo, you got to make a mental health roll, either at the end of every um, number of days equal to the speed rating, or it's every week. I can't remember, but eventually you lose your mind. Okay, obviously synthetics would be immune to this, but to me that's really awesome, and it's sort of packed away in this one section of the book called A Hard Life Amongst the Stars, and you really need to read that section of the book carefully because there's rules smattered throughout that section. Another one is ship maintenance. um, every week of travel, the ship suffers some kind of thing that happens to it, and you have to either make a comtech or heavy machinery roll, and it seems kind of perfunctory, like they didn't really develop that much, which goes into my second big complaint is some of these rules are very underdeveloped. Space should be scary. Like that's what I wanted to do with my campaign. I wanted to avoid doing xenomorphs all the time because that would get boring. Um, and there's not a whole lot of monsters and aliens in here. So I was like, I'm going to focus on how awful space is. Well, if ship maintenance is a simple role every week, and my players figured this out, by the way, uh, stuff happening to the ship isn't going to be all that scary. Okay, um, perfectly fine for a cinematic issue or a game, but if you got campaign stuff, you want to have the occasional, you know, breakdown of the fusion drive, right? And they're like drifting in space, and that could be like an entire campaign session or game session while the players are like trying to fix this thing, and the resources are running dry, and there's no monsters, there's no weird alien stuff. It's just they might starve to death, or they might run out of oxygen or something, and that's stress inducing, stress causing, right? And that could be like an entire game session, and they really don't have that here. Um, and then they have other things like salvage. This I really like the idea of salvage. You find a derelict ship. Well, again, it's very simple. You make a comtech roll or a heavy machinery roll based on the number of successes. Um, That's how much in gear you find, and in terms of cost, and then that's it. And I'm like, I think back to some of the stuff like Zach Smith has done, Zach S. Excuse me, has done with Lamentations and his loot the body charts. You know, like why didn't they do that? Like, make salvage a little bit more interesting. You know, maybe while you're salvaging this derelict, you find like this weird medical storage unit that's still functioning, and then they open it up and there's a xenomorph egg. Wouldn't that be awesome? I think that would be awesome. Um, there's no rules for buying ships. It just sort of tells the players that you should give it to them. Uh, which, okay, fine, but and I'll get to this in the next slide, I think. Um, but what if your players want to buy a ship? You know, I mean, there's the cost. I mean, they're millions of dollars, but I would think after seeing Lamentations of the Flame Princess providing rules for investment, which were really easy and simplified, I would think you could talk briefly about how to mortgage a ship and take out a loan. Um, which brings me to currencies and fluctuating economy. They go into the different currencies each of the government faction use, and some of the corporations have their own dollars and currencies. How do they relate? We really don't. We really don't have that information. We really don't. And which is unfortunate because you could really, really make your campaign come alive and force some really interesting choices for your players. And then, of course, the counter tables. I already mentioned I had some problems with those. Why are space encounters limited to just passing spaceships? I mean, you're in space. How come you can't have like a rogue asteroid or planetoid pop up on the radar? You know, why? Like, why was that ignored? I don't know. So that's another complaint. Number three is there's not enough critters, monsters, and alien life forms to maintain a campaign's interest. Like xenomorph is the big thing, and if you're going to do a cinematic game one shot, you should absolutely use a xenomorph. But if you're using xenomorphs in every session of your campaign, or if every one of your jobs that you create, that you generate, involves xenomorphs or synthetics, it's going to get boring real quick. I think there could have been an alien generator, um, like just a monster generator in there, just to allow player game masters to have a little bit of fun and add something new to this universe, um, and compete with like another sci-fi horror game called Mothership, you know, and there should be other stuff that makes space hell. Okay, and that kind of goes back to the encounter tables. Like, how come there's not some, pulsar exploding or something, and the players have to deal with like this wave of radiation that's about to hit their ship? You know, um, there is a section on cults and faiths that exist out in the stars, and that makes sense. I mean, it just makes sense that that would happen, but it really feels underdeveloped. I think there's an example of two in the book. I honestly can't remember, and I apologize for that. But this could be options for adversaries, and it's like it's just not there. I would have liked to see more of that. And then, of course, the xenomorphs really need to be the dragons of the campaign, the big thing that either ends the campaign or everything is working towards. The book makes a great job at making them this shadowy threat. They are rumors on the frontier that there's some sort of thing out there that could, you know, kill an entire colony. Um, but the the main thing about this book, Alien RPG, you can't use it unless, of course, you're doing a cinematic game. So, like, there needs to be something more here, and it's just not there. So, um, those are some of my big complaints, and I think I've mentioned this in previous videos. The layout it drives me crazy. It's a beautiful book, but oh my God, it's so hard to find some rules sometimes. I don't understand the organization. Once you get past character generation, the talents, and the gear, all of a sudden it's really hard to find stuff. I've tabbed my book. I might have to buy a second book, one for play, one just put on the shelf. You know what I mean? Uh, but anyway, recommendations. Okay, $64,000 question. Should you buy this game? I'm gonna say yeah. I mean, if you like doing one shots, like I'm a big fan of doing Halloween one shots with my friends. You know, we take a break from whatever campaign we're playing, whether it's a second edition game or Call of Duty, whatever we're playing. We take a break and then we do just some fun, one shot that's all about blood, guts, and gore. This is perfect. The cinematic play, pick a xenomorph, draw a map of some colony or some ship or whatever, and have the players make some characters and then go to town. I mean, it is great. And if you follow the procedures close enough with how the alien moves silently with mobility checks versus observation, you're going to have a blast and it's going to be a lot of fun. It's worth the price of admission. That being said, I can't help but compare Alien RPG to my experience with the game Mothership. Mothership seems better suited for campaign play, and that's unfortunate because I think Alien RPG is the better system. Um, but there's just more support for campaign play with the game like Mothership. So, what I started doing in preparation for this campaign I ran is I made a bunch of stuff. And here's me pimping my blog, Lord Mateus's Ancient Tomes and Wondrous Items. Feel free to go there. Feel free to copy it. Do whatever you want. It's obviously free, but there's entries, not just like play reports. I think my campaign lasted 6 or 7 sessions. There was a TPK, essentially, and then the players, life happened, and we just kind of like, okay, that's it. Um, but you will also find some of the stuff I did. Okay, so um, one of my players was a marshal, and he wanted to be kind of like a bounty hunter. So I kind of created my own bounty hunter rules as to be like an option for missions. Um, I developed purchasing rules for starships, currency exchange rates, and how to have supplies affect the long haul. So you're not just rolling for whether the ship breaks down, your supplies dwindle as you're traveling across the stars, right? I created two cults that you might find interesting: the Seekers in the Void and the Sagittarians. Uh, and they can be adversaries, something that occurs. Maybe they bump into your players bump into them or something. I had a hireling table. Also works well for random NPC generation. I expanded the encounter tables to include more than just the boring list of spaceship types you might bump into. There's asteroids, black holes, strange alien artifacts. Um, I can't remember what it's called, but it's just like a shot of radiation. There was like a Netflix series that talked about all the ways space could kill you that came out like 10 years ago. I basically watched that again and pulled ideas from it. Okay. Um, and then my favorite thing is I created a We Loot the Derelict salvage table chart. Um, and that includes maybe finding some weird alien tech, a xenomorph egg, weapon systems. Things are a little bit more interesting than, oh, you found, 100K worth of stuff times the number of successes you had on your Comtech roll. I mean, that is so boring, you know. Um, Oh yeah, and I also had in one of my entries, I created psychic duel rules for gunfights on the frontier. Again, my buddy was playing a martial character, and he wanted to do stuff like that. So my campaign, I think, worked sort of. It was a space trucker campaign. Keep on the Borderland style. So I set Novgorod Station down somewhere. I had a job board. They got to pick which jobs they wanted to go on, and all these rules that you see here um, were meant to sort of flesh things out, but to keep the players hungry. I starved them. I made it really hard to make money, so they'd have to keep, making these runs, making jobs. So like, they purchased a used starship, and so they had a mortgage. I think they had to make like at least, not a mortgage, excuse me, a loan. They had to pay. Well, it's like a mortgage, I guess. $45,000 a month they had to make. So they would go on these jobs, and if there was like an extra thing that they could do, they would do it just for the extra money, right? And then eventually, as we started to like sort of get into a groove, and understand the system a bit more, they started encountering weirder things. So, and you'll see that if you read through some of the play reports on my blog. So, but that's it. That's Alien RPG, folks. I like the game. I wanted to love the game, but the campaign play is really lacking, in my opinion. I think what I've done at my blog will help you have a successful campaign. So please check out my blog. Um, maybe I'll get to making my own monster creation table. I don't know. Maybe I'll do that sometime. But anyway, folks, that's it. Thanks again for watching these videos. I hope your Alien RPG games are awesome, and I will see you around. Take care.